BU goalie Will Barnes stole this one, like the Afe Coleman at a Seder or the cookies out of the cookie jar at Grandma's. And to be honest with you, it was just another day at the office for him. And we're back, Nothing Near Post fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Nothing Near Post show. Obviously, you got Silbs on the mic here. We're going to go solo this week as we continue to barrel towards conference playoff time, which we are getting this weekend. Starting with some line drills. I mean, how awesome have these NHL playoffs been? You know, in the background here, we got Florida and Tampa, the battle of Florida going on. You obviously got the battle for Ontario going on as well. Later tonight, can the Jets continue to dominate the Blues, and how does Vegas bounce back in mini? But unbelievable NHL playoffs. Other line drills. All right, it is lacrosse related, but just in a couple hours ago, Chaminade defeats St. Anthony's 11-10. Ended up happening on the last play of the game. Notre Dame recruit for Chaminade goalie Kieran Walsh. I mean, how about Coach Wellner going back to the well? No pun intended, to grab another Chaminade goalie. Obviously, when the pipeline's greased, the pipeline is greased. Kieran Walsh made 2 stops in the final seconds to help secure that 11-10 win and snap the 8-game winning streak for St. Anthony's in that Long Island rivalry. Pretty cool for those guys. That's a huge win. All right, huge win for the Chaminade Flyers. Shout out Roy Meyer, Chaminade alum. Okay, moving on to low to high. Got to start with history being made this weekend. CJ Kirst, your future number 1 pick in the PLL entry draft. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he's going to break the all-time goals record this weekend, barring catastrophe, of course. And he's going to do it in the least amount of games. Okay, the race to 224. I guess prior to 224, the leader was Mac O'Keefe. He hit 221 in 66 games. He was then surpassed by Peyton Cormier, the Wahoo of legend. He did it in 73 games. And then Kirsty this weekend, CJ, Mr. Kirst, I will call him. Okay, he's took him 60 games to tie Peyton Cormier at 224. He's going to need 61 games to break it. So Nothing Near Post salutes you, CJ. Awesome stuff. Fired up to see you break the record. Let's hope they don't roll out the carpet like they did for Ovechkin mid-game here. Take it in stride. I know the Kirst family is as humble as they get. I know he's just going to score, celebrate like he always does with his teammates, and move on. But looking forward to seeing that history be made for sure. Another piece of low to high here. I was looking at, I forget where it was, okay, but somebody put out a conferences by non-league winning percentage as of April 15th. So a little bit out of date. All right, a little bit out of date, but a lot of teams are done with their non-conference schedules. All right, to be expected, the Big Ten sat atop the leaderboard, 35-13 for a 73% winning percentage. All right, hand up, accountability. Nothing Near Post was wrong. We thought the ACC was going to be better this year. All right, Big Ten found a way, but not by as much as you'd think. ACC second with a 71% winning percentage at 32-13, and actually that went up a touch with UVA beating Lafayette. Okay, third is the Ivy League, 32-15 at 68%. So both the ACC and the Ivy League, 32 non-conference wins. And then you got the A10 with 31-25 for a 55% win percentage, followed by the Patriot League and the Big East, both at 500, 26-26. CAA just under 500, 27-29, 27 wins, 29 losses, and so on from there. You got the NEC in 8th, America East, surprisingly, in 9th, A-Fun, or the A-Sun that most know it by, 18 for 34, and the MAAC 14 for 38 in last. I do think it's interesting that the ASUN sits as low as they do, uh, but I think that also just speaks to their scheduling, right? Speaks to their scheduling. You got teams like Utah and Jacksonville playing ACC teams on their schedule. Pretty awesome. Now, as we get into the last weekend of college lacrosse regular season games, obviously there's some conferences that are going to be rolling into playoff time, Big Ten and the MAAC. We're going to start with the MAAC. 6 teams get in, Sunday quarters. That's this weekend. All right. Right now, looking at the current standings, you got Sacred Heart at 6-1, Siena at 6-1, Canisius at 6-2, Marist at 5-2, Manhattan at 4-3. Those teams, all 5 of them, have clinched. I think the Jaspers are locked in at the 5 spot and will most likely have to travel to Marist on Sunday. And actually, I believe that game is set. Yep, that is true. Manhattan traveling to Marist, and Quinnipiac snuck in the last spot of the 6th seed. They're going to travel to Canisius. All right. As I look at that, with Sacred Heart and Siena getting buys, Canisius and Marist having home games on Sunday, Sacred Heart kind of limped in this past weekend. I mean, we love the Pios here at Nothing Near Post, but they kind of limped in with their effort there on Tuesday night, I believe it was. I think Siena is piping hot. Piping hot. Okay, they've got a 6-game or 7-game win streak now, following their OT loss to Sacred Heart, and they've got that top spot locked up at 7-1. I think Siena's going to run the table here. That's my pick. Okay, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. I hope the Jaspers can get a win on the road, but anything can happen in the MAAC, as Coach Balkin likes to say. But keep an eye out on the Siena Saints here as we go. They've obviously got a bye this weekend, but going to be a pretty cool tournament to watch. The MAAC, they play it, they do it right. All right, they're always finding ways to get on TV, whether it's the 11 a.m. slot or playing a playoff game on a Sunday. You love to see it. Next up, Patriot League. 6 teams get in, 1 and 2 get a bye. The reigning champs, the Lehigh Mountain Hawks. All right, the quarters are going to be on Tuesday, April 29th, hosted by the 3 and 4 seeds. As it stands right now, Army's in the 1 hole as a 6-1. They've got a home game against Loyola this weekend. BU got a great win at home against the Lehigh Mountain Hawks to move them to 5-2. They've got a home game against Colgate this weekend. Lehigh 4-3, coming off a loss at BU. They're hosting Lafayette. Colgate 4-3, obviously at BU. Lafayette 4-3, obviously at Lehigh. And then you've got Loyola and Navy both at 3-4, both on the road. Loyola at Army, Navy at Bucknell. Obviously, Navy's got an easier path to 4-4 than Loyola does. And that gets them in. A Navy win, so that would put Army, BU, Lehigh, Colgate, Lafayette, and Navy in, even though Loyola's been hot as of late. Still going to be wild for some seeding, especially with BU playing Colgate. That'll shift some things around, and Lehigh playing Lafayette. That'll shift some things around. So keep an eye on the Patriot League this weekend. But before we do that, can we talk about a few of the Patriot League games from this past weekend? First, BU Lehigh. Let me set the stage. Lehigh outshot BU. Lehigh had 5 more shots on goal. Lehigh had 7 less turnovers. Lehigh cleared the ball at 95% to BU's 86. Usually BU being the 10-man team, that's flipped. But not last Saturday. Lehigh won the face-off battle at 58%. And Lehigh's Casey Heath had a decent game between the pipes, making 13 saves. And with all those analytics, even though they were on the road, you'd think Lehigh wins the game by a couple of goals at least, or at least covers the 2.5 goal spread that Vegas had them at. And that right there, is why I'm more of a Manalytics guy on this Nothing Near Post show. Okay, this is shit that you dream about as a goalie. Winning a game for your team, and not just with one play at the end of a game with a big save, but in totality. BU goalie Will Barnes stole this one, like the Afe Coleman out of Seder or the cookies out of the cookie jar at Grandma's. And to be honest with you, it was just another day at the office for him. He posted a career-high 23 save effort, and for that, he was named the Patriot League Men's Lacrosse Goalkeeper of the Week for the 5th time this season. All right, Barnesy, the senior from South Riding, Virginia, by the way of Paul VI. Shout out the Panthers and Coach Schwartz. Barnesy became the only goalie in program history with 3 games of 20 or more saves in his career. And this was his second this year. And he's only been a full-time starter for 2 years. All right, and BU's had some great goalies. And some goalies that have seen a ton of rubber being a relatively new program, right? You think Christian Carson Bannister, CB, to kind of start things off for BU. Then you had Joey McSorley, who is an unbelievable netminder, who had at least 120 save performance in his career as a 2 or 3 year starter. Then you had Matt Garber, who had a great career, all right? And just continuing with the pedigree between the pipes for Coach Poli, Coach Salippo. You've got Will Barnes now with his 3rd 20 save effort. And again, he stole this one, 23 saves. Insanity. I hope he didn't buy a single beer at the draft on Saturday night. All right. I personally think this dude Barnesy has a future in the PLL if he wants it. I mean, he leads the country in save percentage for seniors, albeit slightly. Okay, he still has the best number. Logan McNaney will probably get more hype, which might be deserved, but Barnesy, friend of the show, he earned a shot at the PLL, in my opinion. Another game this weekend, Navy at Loyola. I did not see this result coming. The home cooking of Ridley Field has been good to the Hounds the last 2 weeks for sure. And we've gotten a bit of an offensive explosion, but I'm not surprised in that. Coach Van Arsdale is one of the best in the game. He just quietly goes about his business. Similarly to another great longtime elite offensive coordinator, Coach Metzbauer, who's out at Denver now. And you know, if Coach Bolkin was on tonight with me, I would have asked him this question. How many words do you think would have been spoken if Coach Van and Coach Metz sat next to each other at the hotel bar in Dover, Delaware after day 1 of the Adrenaline Platinum Cup at the DE Turf? Because I'll tell you, the over-under, 2 beers, hour and a half, 90 minutes. I'm setting the over-under at number of words at like 11 and a half. 2 dudes just quietly go about their business and produce. So shout out to Coach Van for sticking with that room, and for that room sticking with him and finding ways to score a ton of goals here late. Obviously have a huge test against Army this weekend to play their way in. But back to the game. Okay, Minikis, back to the Loyola Navy game. Matthew Minikis has come alive over the last 4 games for the Hounds, and it's no surprise why they've won 3 out of their last 4, with the 1 loss coming in OT. Minikis' stat line for the last 4 games: at Bucknell, 5-2; at Towson, 2-3; home against Holy Cross, 4-0; home against Navy, 5-3 for an 8-banger. All right, the 5-3 against Navy is the most impressive to me, not because it's the highest point total of the 4-game stretch, but because the Navy defense is above average. They're good. Okay, now they're 5th in the the Patriot League in goals against, and 6th in save percentage at 53%. Not great, but definitely above average. But Minikis just found a way to put it on him. All right, to put it on him. So, I mean, if we're gonna do this on the fly with the Patriot League, okay. You got Army at home versus Loyola. Let's say they get that win. All right, I think Army's on a mission. Okay, I think Army's on a mission. You got BU at home versus Colgate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that game at the end here, but game could go either way. BU wins, they're at 6-2. They solidify the 2 spot. BU loses, they're at 5-3. Colgate's also at 5-3, but Colgate will have the head-to-head. So that'll jumble some things up. Then you got Lehigh hosting Lafayette. Lafayette on the up and up. let's say Lehigh gets that win. They're also going to be at 5-3. That would put BU, Lehigh, and Colgate all at 5-3. Lehigh doesn't have the head-to-head over BU or Colgate, so they would be third there. Colgate would have the head over BU, so I would assume that BU goes to the 2. Colgate goes to the 2, BU goes to the 3, Lehigh to the 4, leaving Lafayette at 4-4 in the 5, and I would assume Navy over Bucknell this weekend sneaks into the 6th spot. If Lafayette beats Lehigh, totally different story because Lafayette's got the head-to-head over BU. Colgate's got the head-to-head over Lafayette. And the BU, we're assuming BU's at 5-3, so that means Colgate has the head-to-head over BU. So pay attention to the Patriot League. Going to be an incredible sort of finish here. I believe all those games are on Friday night, too. We'll talk more about that. On to the next. Keep it moving here. No horns on nothing near post, old school style. Even though I know a longtime listener, Wash, wants horns back in the game. Okay, no horns here. Quick restart. Big East. 4 teams get in. Reigning champ Georgetown for their 6th straight. I learned today that Denver Pios are the predetermined hosts this year. Okay, and keep that in mind as we move through this. Current standings, Villanova at the 1 spot, 4-0. Georgetown at 2 at 3-1. Denver at 3, 2-2. Providence at 4 at 2-2. And Marquette at 5 at 1-3. Villanova is at Georgetown. Denver is at Marquette. And Providence is hosting the Johnnies. Now, if we look at the 2 games that I think are most meaningful here, Villanova versus Georgetown. Obviously the game of the weekend. All right. As the Cats head down to the nation's capital. If Georgetown wins, they're going to be the 1. If they lose, if they, being Georgetown, loses and Denver wins, the Hoyas fall to the 4 spot. Now, for all intents and purposes, Georgetown is a one-man show on offense. Let's call a spade a spade. They go as Aiden Carroll goes. So in their game against Nova, one, he can get going. I mean, can he get going against a very stout Nova defense led by Coach Chris Miller, who's one of the least talked about elite defensive coordinators in the country? And can the supporting cast around him carry any weight on the score sheet? It's the only way they're going to be able to get this thing done against a hot Villanova team, okay? But for Villanova, they're also built on defense like Georgetown. Their offense, Villanova's offense, has found ways down the stretch here to score goals and win games. Can they find goals against a great Georgetown defense? Anchored by who I would call a top 10 goalie in the country, Anderson Moore, arguably top 5. Anderson leads the Big East in goals against average at a stingy 9.08 number. Keep an eye on that one. I don't know what the over-under set at yet. I'd assume it's like 18.5, and I'd still might even take the under. Going to be an absolute battle in the nation's capital. The last storyline in that game, though, that I want to cover, which I thought was actually really interesting as we were looking at it, Villanova leads the Big East in penalties and penalty minutes per game. But Georgetown's extra man unit is dead last in the Big East, operating at a 19% clip. 19% clip with an extra player. That's insane. The talent that they've got, something's just not gelling. I don't know if it's injuries. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know what it is, but something ain't working there at the 19% clip. And what's crazy is that 19% number is 14 percentage points lower than the 5th place team. They're not even within a long stick's reach of 5th place in the Big East as far as extra man percentage. That's not a recipe for success. I'll tell you that right now. So in a tight game, keep an eye on those EMO man down units, what those opportunities look like. Looking at the Denver Marquette game, all right, Can Denver bounce back on the road after losing at home to Providence? Some people close to the Big East have identified that Denver's struggles have reared their ugly head because of their lack of dominant faceoff presence that they've had in the past. I mean, I know they've got the Lynchburg transfer battling down there at the X, but he just hasn't been what they've expected or what they've found to have in the past. All right, they're playing a Marquette team who went from a soul-crushing loss where they had 2-goal lead with 4:22 left in the game on the main line at Villanova, thinking their postseason dreams were dead after that loss, to a couple hours later getting a second lease on life with the Providence win. Now they're in a position where win and they're in. And to stoke the fire, it's the Eagle Marquette's senior day. And these seniors would love nothing more than to spoil the Pios Saturday afternoon and getting a win over Denver for the first time in their careers. Denver is 8-0 in the last 8 matchups against Marquette. And in that game, Denver-Marquette, bottom line, win and you're in. Lose and dust off your golf clubs, which is crazy to think for a Denver team that absolutely manhandled Duke earlier this year. Next up, ACC. Okay, ACC. Top 4 get in, starting Friday, May 2nd. It's going to be hosted at the American Legion Memorial Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, Hounds Country. The reigning champs, your Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Okay, current standings right now. Notre Dame 3-1. They're done with their league games. UNC 2-1, Cuse 2-1, Duke 1-2, and Virginia 0-3. All right. Quickly before we look at the next games that are remaining, or I guess the 2 games that are remaining in ACC play, we got to quickly touch on the Cuse versus Duke game from this past weekend down in Durham. People after that game already saying Cuse's defense is dead, not what we thought they were. First off, I've never seen such a flip-flopping in a fan base / hater base on a single unit quite like this year on Cuse's defense. It seems like every week they're back. Coach O'Dearna's the prophet. Okay, next week they're dead. Can't do anything. Can't stop a nosebleed. What are we talking about here? Okay, they gave up 11. They gave up 11 to Duke. All right, yeah, this isn't the Duke of a few years ago, sure, but they gave up 11, and Duke's averaging 12.29 goals per game, so they kept them below their average. And to add to it, it was the lowest goal total the Cuse defense has given up in Durham since 1978. That's 47 years for those of you who need help with math like me. On top of it, 5 of the 11 came in transition, which doesn't always reflect on the defense breaking down, more just the offense making a good play. This Cuse defense can do it. All right. I think I'm more worried about the offense and the way that they performed on the road against a good, formidable Duke defense, right? That's a type of defense that you got to beat in May if you want to do what you want to do. I don't know. We're gonna need more. If you want to play deep into May, you need more on both sides of the ball. Certainly need a stout defense to hold you down and anchor you and foundationally, but you got to score goals too. So keep an eye on that. And then you look at the Duke versus UVA game. You're playing for a chance at another week of practice. And quite honestly, UVA is playing for their season. They can almost salvage this season with a win at Klockner this weekend. Okay. I know we're looking ahead right here, but looking ahead at those games, right? So Duke's at UVA. Sorry, I'm seeing red after everybody jumping down Cuse defense's throat. I won't let people do that to my boy Coach O'Dearna and that defensive unit with Riley Figueres and Michael Grace and Billy Dwan the third. I won't let it happen. I won't stand for it. But looking ahead, Duke at UVA, playing for another chance at a week of practice. If I were to ask you, an NP listener, What was the split between Duke and UVA in their last 26 meetings? What would you guess it was? I'll give you a second to think about it. 26 meetings. This dates back to 2005. All right. UVA's got a couple national championships in that time. Duke's got a couple national championships in that time. What would you think that split would be? I'll tell you what it is. 26 games played. Duke has 24 wins in the last 26 meetings. That's preposterous. All right, that's preposterous. Now, every year's a new year, but that's a big brother, little brother on the driveway basketball court, or the street hockey driveway. Listen to me, I sound like I grew up in the burbs, which I did, but that's domination, 24-2. Okay, I mean, if history tells us anything, Duke wins this game, but it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, what does a Duke loss do for their NCAA tourney aspirations? They probably still get in. I don't know. We'll do an NCAA tournament, NCAA bracket breakdown here in the future next week. But I think a loss probably negatively impacts bubble teams more than anything. With potentially, if UVA can win another game, sneaking them in. So now you're getting 4 ACC instead of 3, taking away somebody else's at-large. That probably deserves it. But I don't know. Keep an eye on that game for sure. I mean, the UNC Cuse game in the Dome, that's going to be an interesting one. All right. How does Cuse bounce back? I mean, there's no place like Dome, and they love playing at home. They got a lot on the line, Cuse does, heading into the ACC playoffs, right? As does UNC. Okay, as does UNC. UNC sitting at 9-3 overall. All right, some big wins for sure. They're coming off a doubling up of Notre Dame. A loss, getting doubled up at home against Notre Dame. It's 12-6. So you got two teams coming off losses, fighting for seeding in the ACC playoffs. Going to be interesting. All right, two teams that certainly play good defense. You got Paul Barton and Gianfranco and on the UNC side. Paul Barton down at close, Gianfranco in net. You got the Cuse defense that plays well. You got two offenses that, if I remember correctly, Cuse only scored, 7 goals last week? I mean, Carolina coming off a 6-goal performance against a good Notre Dame defense. No doubt about it. Let's confirm that, Cuse. I think it was 11-7. Yep, 11-7. So you got two teams that scored 7 and 6 goals respectively last week. And two offenses that are proud, right? Two offenses that are proud. You got the upstart boys in Petramala and Duffy with, their unit. And then you got Cuse with Spolina and Hiltzy. Something's got to give. All right, something's got to give. I can't imagine both those teams will score less than double digits again, but maybe the under's the play this weekend. Two teams that are reeling a little bit. I don't know. We'll have to see what the number is, but enough of the ACC. Okay, let's move on to the Big Ten. Looking at the conference playoffs, everybody gets in, as we talked about last week, even Hopkins, so all 6. Reigning champs are the Michigan Wolverines. They are starting conference playoffs this weekend. The quarters are Saturday, April 26th at the higher seed. Okay, so end of regular season standings. Ohio State took the regular season crown home. You got Maryland slotting in at the 2 after a goal differential tiebreaker. And then then Penn State in the 3 and Michigan in the 4. Rutgers in the 5, and Hopkins in the 6th. All right. Now, opening weekend this weekend, as I mentioned, Ohio State and the Terps both get to sit and rest at home, and it can't go overstated how important this is. Same in the Patriot League. Okay, same in the Patriot League. The 1 and 2 seeds get to sit at home and rest while the other teams have to play an extra game. And it's not only playing the extra game, but it's the way that you've got to stack 3 games in 7 days to get it done, if not less. It's actually less in the Patriot League, and it'll be about 7 days here. But number 3, Penn State is gonna host Hopkins. All right, these two teams met 2 weeks ago. Penn State got a dominating home win, 10-4. Michigan is going to host the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, also a rematch from 2 weeks ago, but this one was in Piscataway, okay, which resulted in an 8-6 win for Michigan. Now, obviously, Ohio State and Maryland get the bye week. My sleeper pick for this one, and I don't know if it's much of a sleeper pick at all, but I'm taking Penn State. They're third in goals against average and third in face-off win percentage in the league. All right. You need enough out of those 2 spots to give Trainer, Amon, and Lehman, and Aquino, the rookie, enough of a foundation to go and win it. All right. Enough of a foundation to go and win it, which I think that unit can do. All right. Which I think that unit can do. But, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. This is prime time Tills time. All right. Even though Ohio State has the better defensive numbers, the Terps' strength of schedule is much higher. And I know Fayok has been great between the pipes this year, but I'm taking McNaney in that matchup. If they do meet, I should say. The Terps are slightly better at the X, 51%. But here's my biggest reason why. I think Maryland takes home the Big Ten title in a week's time. Tills is sick of losing the Big Ten playoffs. He's sick of it. There have been 9 Big Ten postseason titles awarded. Michigan has won the last 2. The Terps have 4, including back-to-back prior to Michigan going back-to-back. Tills and his iPad are on a mission here in 2025, in my opinion. All right, and keep an eye on the Nothing Near Post socials. We've got a t-shirt coming out that I think you Terp fans are going to really, really enjoy. Ivy League. Okay, the Ivy League. Top 4 get in. Number one hosts. This year, that's going to be your Cornell Big Red. All right, or I guess... yeah, it'll be your Cornell Big Red no matter what. Princeton is your reigning champs. Current standings right now is Cornell's 5-0, Princeton's 4-1, Harvard's 3-2. Yale is a sneaky 3-2. And then you got Dartmouth, UPenn, and Brown to round it out. All right. Not too many big games here. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this field is pretty much set. Cornell the 1, Princeton the 2, Harvard the 3, Yale the 4. Okay, Yale is at Princeton, so they would be, if they lose, they'll be 3-3. Harvard's at Brown. Let's assume they win. They're at 4-2. Okay, Princeton 5-1 because they're going to beat Yale in this scenario. And Cornell hosting Dartmouth. I know the Big Green were an upstart with Coach Kerwin getting some traction up there, but they move to 6-0 if they can win on Schoellkopf Field. Now, like I said, and I think I mentioned this last week, Cornell going to be your host for the 2nd year in a row, but last year the home cooking was unkind to them. Okay, I don't know if they drank out of the glassware at the Creeker or what, but that home cooking was no good for them last year, losing in the semis. Okay, maybe this year's different, but we'll see. I mean, how about Yale though? Everyone said they were dead, but here they are getting into the Ivy League tournament. Barring a wild result in the Cornell-Dartmouth game, right? Don't sleep on the Elis, all right? Don't sleep on the Elis. They'll battle. They'll play hard. Any Coach Shea coached team is going to play with heart and passion. There's no doubt about it, all right? Now, looking at the Crimson, With a Harvard win, they'll reach double-digit wins in a season for the first time since 2014. And for you listeners that are in my age bracket, that seems like yesterday. Okay. But for those of you keeping track at home and who aren't good at math just like me, that's over a decade ago. Harvard hasn't reached double-digit wins in over a decade. And a big part of that success this year, in my opinion, you'd think it was all three of their attackmen reaching the 40-point plateau. Big ups to them, to those three guys. Yeah, the 40-point plateau is big. Okay. And Coach Hutchinson has done a great job with that offensive unit, getting them pumping. But I'd argue more importantly than the 40-point plateau and them pumping in goals, they are number one in the country in riding percentage, holding their opponents to 71% clearing on the year. That is so many extra possessions. Okay, that is so many extra possessions. And going into the Cornell-Harvard game this past weekend, which I covered on Twitter, great showing, obviously, in Alston. But going into that game, Cornell was averaging 16 goals. Harvard was averaging 15 goals. Cornell eclipsed that with their 21 burger. Harvard just below it at 13, so theirs will drop a little bit. But, I mean, yeah, Harvard's offense is humming, but when you get that many extra possessions and turning a team over 7 out of 10 times in the clearing game, that would be, 6 turnovers if they cleared the ball 20 times a game, 6 extra possessions. That's going to be awesome, not only for your offense to have extra looks, but demoralizing for a defense, because not only do they have to play defense again, but they're exhausted because they just played a possession. So certainly something to keep an eye on as we head into the Ivy League playoffs. But in this offensively driven league, okay, I want to look at the specialists real quick, and I'll say it again. We talked about it last week with Coach Bolkin. Princeton is exactly where they want to be. Under the radar, not talked about. Nobody's talking about them in the media. Coach Madelon and the Tigers want it that way. I'm guilty of it as well, right? I'm guilty of it as well. They're sitting right where they want to be, okay, in that 2-3 hole, depending on this weekend. All right, I got to believe they'll jump Harvard because I think they've got the head-to-head. Let's double check that. Yeah, Princeton, I was wrong. Princeton 4-1. All right, Princeton 4-1 in the 2-hole. I think I already mentioned that. They're hosting Yale. So Princeton's exactly where they want to be. I don't want to say sleeping giant, but they're a crouching tiger in the reeds, in the weeds, sitting back, just letting everybody else sort of do their thing, get the media attention, get their heads pumped up about how good they are. Keep an eye out for the Tigers here down the stretch. But in this offensively driven league, let's take a look at the specialists. Okay, first the draw men. Face-off win percentage in the league. Top spot, Jack Cascadon of Cornell, 61% with 179 wins on the year. All right, he's a junior out of Garden City, coming out of public school, Garden City High School. Number 2, you got Spencer Regan, Dartmouth, 54.5%, 145 wins, freshman out of Salt Lake City, Utah, by way of Culver. Then you've got Machado Rodriguez from Yale at 53%, 89 wins. The senior from Southampton, New York, out of Chaminade. Then you get the number 4 spot, Nick Waymeyer, also from Yale, 50%, 60 wins. The freshman from Sellersville, PA, out of Malvern Prep. You got Dash Sachs in the 5-hole from Brown at 49.5%, 105 wins. The senior out of Westport, Connecticut, by way of Taft. And in the 6th spot, you got Andrew McMeekin, Princeton. A surprising 47% on 107 wins. The junior out of Newtown Square, Pennsylvania, from the Episcopal Academy. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but Andrew McMeekin puts up numbers in the weight room. His deadlift's insane. And he's got stick skills to back it up. If I remember correctly, he was pumping in goals last year. Let's see. I don't have it right on hand. Let's see if we can pull up his stat line for this year. Hasn't been pumping in goals this year. I am way off. 0 goals, 1 assist on the year for McMeekin. Okay. 7 hole, you got Stevie Davis at UPenn, 47% on 99 wins. The freshman from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, out of LaSalle. And then in the 8 hole, you've got Jackson Heenahan out from Harvard, 44%, 78 wins. Okay. His backups, we'll call them his backups, 42% and 32% win percentages. But Heenahan is the freshman out of Marshfield, Mass. From Thayer Academy. Now, other than 1 through 8 and Cascadin kind of leading the way, between those 8 dudes, there is one public school kid, and that's the guy leading the pack, which I love to see. We love public school here at Nothing Near Post, okay, versus 7 private school kids. All right. What's also crazy is 4 out of the 8 are rookies. And then lastly, what's crazy to me is to see Harvard and Princeton's success in the win column versus their face-off numbers. Princeton is in the 6 hole with McMeekin at 47%, and Harvard's in 8th at 44%. Yet they're in the 2 and 3 spots in the league. Really impressive. All right, really impressive. Now, flipping the script on the specialists, we're gonna look to the backbones of the goaltenders, the netminders. Princeton's Ryan Croddick, he leads the league in save percentage at 59.2%, and this is probably why they can get away with the below average mark at the faceoff dot. Okay. Princeton's Croddick and Cornell's Wyatt Nust are tied atop the league in goals against average at 10. Dartmouth's Mason Morrill leads the league in saves per game, albeit slightly over Croddick, at 14.58 saves per game. Croddick's got 14.42. Okay. And then you got other great goalies in this league with Connor Foley of Brown and Emmett Carroll of Penn. Good goalie league between those 4 guys for sure. I know Emmett Carroll had a ton of hype coming into this season. Obviously, Penn hasn't done what they needed to do in the win column to give him the flowers at the media level. But I mean, you can't speak highly enough of what Ryan Croddick has done in his first year between the pipes in the post Michael Giaficaro era in Princeton, New Jersey. So. Nothing Near Post salutes you, Croddick. Hopefully you can continue to have a great year here down the stretch and take Princeton to the promised land a little bit. All right. Definitely going to need a big game out of the Princeton netminder if they want to beat the Cornell offense averaging over 16 goals a game. I would keep an eye on the Connor Foley kid down in Providence, Rhode Island, though, for the Brown Bears. That dude's special. Super special dude between the pipes. Let's fly through the rest of these here just quickly, just to make sure we can touch on them. First, you got the NEC top 4 get in. You got Bobby Moe sitting at 6-0. Okay, we said it last week, but we'll say it again. Robert Morris led by Coach Craig McDonald, Geneva, New York native. Arguably the best home field advantage in the country. And as my good friend Gavin likes to say, ain't nobody wants to visit Moon Township, PA, especially in the spring. All right, Bobby Moe sitting at the top of the standings at 6-0, Lemoyne at 5-1. LIU with their upset win over this past weekend. Okay, over Lemoyne, they're sitting at 4-2, VMI at 3-3. Detroit Mercy also at 3-3, and then the Cleveland State Vikes sitting at 2-4 with a chance. Okay. Remaining schedule, Robbie Moe's at Lemoyne. LIU is at VMI. So top 4 teams are playing against each other here in the last week of NEC play. And then Detroit Mercy's at Cleveland State. All right. Going to be some actual craziness, I think, because if Cleveland State can beat Detroit Mercy, that puts them at 3-3 and gives them the head-to-head. Or excuse me, it puts Cleveland State at 3-4. Detroit Mercy also at 3-4. Cleveland State doesn't have the head-to-head over VMI, so they might be dead. Hate to see it for the Vikes, but I mean, the 1 seed, only 4 get in. Gonna be really tough to beat Bobby Moe in Moon Township. no matter what way you slice it. But you love to see the Lemoyne Dolphins, okay? Young program in Division One, making noise in the NEC. Keep an eye on the Sharks, though. The LIU Sharks have been great as of late. Great as of late, okay? A10, like I said, this is rapid fire. Top 4 get in. Predetermined hosts is your St. Joe's Hawks. They're your reigning champs as well. Richmond 4-0, High Point 3-1, St. Joe's 2-2, UMass 2-2. Then you got the bottom dwellers, my Hobart Statesman at 1-3, and the Bonnies 0-4. Pretty straightforward here. They're just playing for seeding. Richmond coming off a win over UMass. They're in Philly against St. Joe's. High Point coming off an upset win at St. Joe's. They're going to the Bonnies. St. Joe's 2-2. They're coming off a loss at High Point. They host Richmond, obviously. We already spoke about. And UMass 2-2. They took an L to Richmond this past weekend, and they host Hobart. All right, so let's assume UMass gets the win. Hate to say it, but probably true. St. Joe's, Richmond is going to be a great game to watch. I'm really high on the Spiders. Okay, Coach Chamati, Coach Richards doing a great job down there alongside Colin McGuire. It's going to be tough to beat the Spiders here, even though they've got a host. But, I mean, it's well documented. We've talked about it. Even though they have to go to St. Joe's for the playoffs. St. Joe's doesn't. I mean, they've got a history of losing at home come playoff time during their NEC run. So I could see the Spiders making a run in May as well. Okay, they play good offense. They're calculated. They're smart. They got high IQ. You got the Max Merklinger guy from New Jersey, Seton Hall Prep, running the show in the midfield. You've got Aiden O'Neill at X. And if you ever watch a Richmond game, Aiden O'Neill operating from X is a beautiful thing. And the 5 guys off the ball that are playing with Aiden O'Neill, their spacing when he has the rock is awesome. They give him the entire side to drive up, and Aiden O'Neill's so two-handed, he can drive up. A lot of youth coaches will talk about getting to 5-5. Aiden O'Neill gets to like 10-5. He gets like 10 yards up the field on some of his drives from X, which puts a defense in such a pickle because he's just giving them more space to get underneath to the scary area. So keep an eye on the Richmond Spiders making some noise here as they run into the A10 playoffs, and I think it's theirs to lose. I truly do think it's theirs to lose. Okay, last one. We got the A-Fun. 4 teams get in. Reigning champs are the Utah Utes. They've got 2 straight this year. Predetermined site. The Jacksonville Dolphins will be hosting in Duval. As it stands, Utah's at 4-0. Jacksonville's at 3-1. Air Force is at 3-1. Mercer's at 1-3, and Bellarmine's at 1-3. I personally think Utah holds serve against Air Force, sweep 5-0. Although it's tough to play at Mile High. And if you've ever played at Air Force, there's a sign in the stadium that it's like a caution sign. Caution. You can get elevation, or what do they call it? Elevation sickness. Altitude sickness. There it is. Altitude sickness because you are at 6,000 feet above sea level. So a little bit of psyche there in the stadium where Air Force plays, but I think Utah gets it done. I believe that's where they won. They won it last year, was at Air Force. Jacksonville hosting Mercer, and then Bellarmine is home against Queens. And why that's important? Okay, why that's important? Bellarmine gets a win, gets them to 2-3. Mercer at Jacksonville has an uphill battle to get that W, because if Bellarmine wins, gets to 2-3, Mercer loses, they drop to 1-4. Bellarmine gets in. The Fighting Andy Whitleys get into the A-Fun playoffs. All right, and they earn a trip from Louisville, Kentucky, down to Duval. All right, so keep an eye on that. So that's our conference playoff previews. As I've got the NHL playoffs going on in the background, Kirill Kaprizov doing huge things. All right, for the mini Wild. But last piece here. Let's look at games to watch this weekend. Okay, I'm going to start it off. Two teams that are actually have got ties to the Nothing Near Post show. Friday, 6 p.m., Colgate at BU. Senior night for the Terriers. I'm an upstate New York guy. I'm a double legacy at Colgate. Coach Nagel never gave me a chance to go play for the Raiders, even though I showed up on an unofficial visit with a buddy of mine, Sleeper. I had a good time on my overnight, hung out with Brandon Corp, one of the best midfielders that nobody talks about anymore. But Colgate at BU, senior night. Colgate's got a very, very bad taste in their mouth. Okay. Not only did BU beat them 13-12 in Hamilton, New York last year during their regular season Patriot League game to end the year, but BU doubled down on it 4 days later with an 18-17 triple OT win in the quarters of the Patty League playoffs. Brendan Kelly from Louis Perfetto in triple OT. Who could forget? All right, and I'll tell you who didn't forget, and it's certainly the Colgate Raiders, formerly known as the Red Raiders. All right, so keep an eye on that one. The Judd Lattimore Bowl, 10-man versus 10-man. Okay, Colgate and their chaos against BU and their sort of different type of chaos, but going to be a good one on Nickerson Field Friday at 6 p.m. Another game Friday night, 7 p.m. Georgetown Villanova. Already talked about it. Nova playing for the 1 seed in the sweep of the Big East. All right. Aiden Carroll against Villanova's defense. Villanova's offense. Matt Licata against Georgetown's defense. Villanova, most penalized team in the Big East against Georgetown's worst extra man unit. Keep an eye on that one. All right, keep an eye on that one for sure. And then my last two games of the weekend are going to be the two ACC games, which are beautifully hosted on the ACC network this weekend. 3 o'clock, you got Duke at Virginia for the right to play in the ACC tourney. Winner gets in. Winner gets in. And then 5 o'clock, Cuse hosts North Carolina in the Dome, the friendly confines of the Dome. If you're going to that game, make sure you get yourself a Dome dog. All right, enjoy yourself. Should be a great atmosphere up there at the JMA Wireless Dome. But those are my 4 games to watch. Colgate at BU, Georgetown hosting Villanova, Duke at Virginia, okay, and Cuse hosting North Carolina. And then don't forget, MAAC playoffs start Sunday. All right, 3 straight days of college lacrosse, so buckle up. Although I am going to throw a bonus game in there. Bonus game. Rutgers in Ann Arbor against Michigan. Should be a good one. Rutgers obviously plays great defense. They played to an 8-6 game earlier in the year. It'll be interesting to see what the over/under set at there. But two teams that battling to move on in the Big Ten playoffs. You know, Michigan, reigning champs. Rutgers, they got a win over Maryland this year. Okay, but they're under 500. That they need to make a run if they want to play deeper into May. So, yeah, all right. Well, that's a wrap here this week. Solo show. We got a few interviews in the hopper here as we head into the back end of April and into May. This is the best time for lacrosse. All right. I know Coach Brzezinski was boasting about the outerwear that they didn't have to wear down in Jacksonville pretty much all spring. Us up here in the New England area, in the Mid-Atlantic, we're starting to shed some layers. Things are warming up. Balls are starting to fly a little bit faster in the warmer weather. All right. It's a great time for lacrosse. But to wrap things up today here, if you're a lacrosse fan, obviously you have to have eyes on opening weekend of the NLL playoffs. Okay, but if you're looking for some unique lacrosse, get eyes on the Aleš Hrebresky tournament in Ratitin, Czech Republic. Okay, it's going on right now. All the games are streamed on the LCC Ratitin YouTube page. That's spelled Radotin. They stream them all live and they're archived there, so you can go back and watch all the games. Raditon's home box, outdoors, outdoors, outdoor rink on the turf. It's the mecca of box lacrosse, and the environment's electric. All right, beers are flowing, people are having a great time. Czech Republic knows how to do lacrosse. The Czechs are a top 40 team in the world when it comes to box lacrosse. Um, and this tournament, the Aleš Hrebresky is on par with what us field guys know as Lake Placid or Ocean City or Vail. Okay, but it's arguably cooler for us Americans because it's in Europe. Now I know we don't know the box game as well, and I would never claim that we would, but take a peek at that Aleš Hrebresky. Throw a game on. Okay, throw a game on. It's awesome. Okay, it's awesome. They've got, I believe, they're day 2 right now, which is Thursday night as we're recording. So day 3 will be Friday, and they're rolling. So they're gonna roll right through the weekend. Keep eyes on that, and if you don't, throw it on at work next week. Throw a game on. Okay, find some of the playoff games. Throw it on. It's a ton of fun to watch. But that's all we got for this week's show. Enjoy all the lacrosse this weekend, and just make sure this weekend you always abide by rule number 1, and police those who are not abiding by rule number 1. Nothing near